And I welcome you on behalf of the Unitive cluster. And we're here in the question of whether or not we're working deeply enough to solve today's problems and move beyond problem solving into creating the future that we want. We are being convened by the United Nations Unitive Cluster, which is a UN mechanism that falls under the UN NGO major group. And we've been in existence for about 2.5 years. The UN NGO Major Group Unitive Cluster is focused on unity, and it's grounded in advances in science, and those advances confirm the holistic integrity of all life on Earth. Our work involves providing interventions in the UN in the form of written and oral statements, convenings, and side events in accordance with the UN agenda. And we recognize that there's an emergent understanding of the unitive nature of all beings, and that understanding is coherent with all the major religious and spiritual teachings, and that understanding provides a fundamentally new ground, a new narrative, a new basis for factoring the reality of global interdependencies into the work of the UN. So the purpose of the cluster is to serve as a platform for collaborative, transformative convening and for intervening toward a more unified world. We created it to provide a unit of context for UN interventions and for looking at cross-cutting issues that reflect the integration, the intersectionality, the indivisibility, and the interlinkages of all SDGs. So the question today came from our first speaker, Ambassador King, and the question resonates, how are we working deeply enough? That question resonated so much with the cluster when I brought it back into our meeting that we decided to make it the focus of our work for at least the next quarter. And so Ambassador King, Kehkashan Basu, and Will Keepin, who I'll introduce more thoroughly in a moment, are going to set the stage to begin this inquiry that the Unitive Cluster wants to make on how might we work more deeply? How might we spark a deep enough spark for true transformation, not just changing or fixing things, but we're here in the spirit of recognizing that the deeper the roots, the higher the tree can grow. And so we're here to take a much deeper look at the traumatic changes and crises that are always running through the UN system, and to look at how do we deepen the roots of peace and well-being so that we can cultivate the future that we want. And we're really going to be looking through a lens of love. We also, in our cluster, in our request to form a cluster, we used that word love. And so we thought that the UN approving that might be even well enough to accomplish a lot of our mission. So as is our custom, we usually start in silence, and I'm going to ask you to settle into your seat, release anything from your hands, release into just an easy settling in, knowing you are with a circle of people who are aligned with the principles at the heart of the UN Charter, that we sit here together in our shared humanity, that we sit with the lens of love as we observe the field of thought and of the relationship and activities that are the UN today. Just take a moment of silence. Thank you. I am so pleased to introduce to you Her Excellency Inga Rhonda King. She's the UN Permanent Representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and she came to diplomacy through the private sector. She's lived and worked in several Caribbean countries, the US and China, working as a small business owner, a business strategist, and the author of 3 books and publisher of others. She's also a management accountant with more than 2 decades of professional experience. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and Chemistry, and she's a visionary statesperson who is providing transformative leadership at a time when it's so much needed in the UN. And we are so pleased to have you here, Ambassador King, to talk about how you came to this question.
Well, thank you very much, Joni, for inviting me, and a pleasure to meet some of your other colleagues, and some of them I already know. So it's a pleasure to see you again in this context. So let me jump right in. This section I call the paradox. The question is, are we thinking deeply enough? The moment that question is posed and the moment you begin to consider it, you have already begun to answer it. But notice just what happened in your mind. Did you immediately start formulating an answer? Did you think of a counter example, or did you sit with the question itself, feeling its weight, its implications? Because how we approach this question reveals everything about whether we are thinking deeply enough. There's something almost comedically recursive here, like asking, are we asking enough questions? The questions generates its own solution, yet somehow that doesn't make it trivial. If anything, it makes it more urgent. But to answer whether we are thinking deeply enough, we need to understand, or rather, we need to explore what deep thinking actually looks like and why it's become so elusive. Let me paint two pictures. Yesterday, you probably processed more information than someone in the 1900s encountered in a month. You scrolled, skimmed, absorbed, reacted. Your brain was incredibly active. But when did you last spend even 30 minutes in sustained, uninterrupted thought about a single idea? Now, this question may not be relevant to this group necessarily, but beyond the group. So bear with me. I'm dealing with those who don't meditate, etc. Deep thinking isn't about being smart or having the right questions, the right answers. It's about sustained attention, the willingness to follow an idea down it into its basement, to sit with the confusion rather than immediately Googling our way out of it. It is the difference between consuming thoughts and generating them. Consider the last time you changed your mind about something important. I will bet it didn't happen during a quick scroll through social media. It probably happened during a long walk, a difficult conversation, or a quiet moment when you allowed contradictory ideas to exist in your mind simultaneously without rushing to resolve the tension. Deep thinking is metabolic, not digital. It requires time for ideas to ferment, to combine in unexpected ways. It's the cognitive equivalent of slow cooking rather than microwaving. So if deep thinking requires sustained attention and time for ideas to ferment, why does it feel increasingly difficult to achieve? The answer lies in examining the barriers we have inadvertently constructed. We've built a world that seems designed to prevent deep thinking. Our phones are dopamine slot machines engineered to fracture attention. We've created an economy where productivity means rapid response times, not thoughtful reflection. But here's what's fascinating. We did this to ourselves collectively, choice by choice. Every time we check our phone mid-conversation, we are training our brains for shallowness. Every time we outsource our memory to Google, we are trading depth for convenience. Consider how we approach problems now. Something breaks. We YouTube a solution. We are confused about something. We ask an AI. I'm not saying that this is necessarily wrong. I'm saying it's different. We are developing incredible skills at information retrieval while potentially atrophying our capacity for information generation. The notification that just interrupted your last attempt at reading a book. That wasn't accidental. Someone designed that interruption, optimized it. A/B, tested it. We are living in an attention economy where our capacity for sustained thought is literally the product being sold. Before we get too nostalgic, let's acknowledge something. Humans have always worried about thinking becoming shallow. Socrates feared that writing would weaken our memory. That external storage would make us lazy thinkers. Medieval scholars worried that books would replace contemplation. Every generation fears intellectual decline. And yet, look at what human thinking has indeed accomplished. We decoded DNA, split atoms, sent robots to Mars, and figured out how to perform surgery while the patient is awake. We have developed vaccines in record time and begun to understand consciousness itself. The question isn't whether we are thinking less deeply than some golden age of human reflection, because that golden age probably never existed. The question is whether we are thinking as deeply as our current challenges require. Let's zoom out from individual cognition to how we think together. How does a democracy make decisions? How do institutions approach complex problems? How do we, as species, tackle challenges that no single mind can fully comprehend? Take climate change, perhaps the ultimate test of our collective thinking capacity. It requires systems thinking, long-term perspective, the ability to weigh uncertain probabilities against certain costs. It demands that we think beyond our immediate experience and tribal loyalties. Yet how do we actually approach it? Often with the same shallow patterns, quick fixes, blame assignment, binary thinking, not because we're stupid, but because our individual cognitive habits scale up to become our collective cognitive habits. The quality of our public discourse reflects the quality of our private thinking. The polarization we see in politics might be less about different values and more about different thinking processes, some trained for nuance and others for tribal identification. What happens when we don't think deeply enough? We make decisions based on incomplete information. We solve symptoms rather than causes. We react instead of respond. We perpetuate systems without understanding them. But more than that, there's an existential flatness that comes with shallow thinking. Life becomes a series of reactions rather than a creative engagement with reality. We become consumers of thoughts rather than generators of them. So here's the invitation. Every moment offers a choice between shallow and deep. The next time you're bored, instead of reaching for your phone, sit with the boredom. See what emerges. The next time you disagree with someone, instead of formulating your counter-argument, try to understand their underlying assumptions. The question isn't whether we are thinking deeply enough, as if there's some cosmic standard we need to meet. The question is whether we're thinking as deeply as this moment deserves, as deeply as this problem requires, as deeply as this life invites. Because here's the beautiful paradox we return to. The very act of asking whether we are thinking deeply enough is itself an act of thinking deeply enough. The question contains its own answer, not as information, but as invitation. But we do have a problem today. We are losing the art of thinking deeply. And I will spend the final minute or two to touch on how to think deeply. And I enter that space with a quote from Blaise Pascal. All of humanity's problems, he said, stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Cal Newport, many of you might be familiar with his work, deep work, as defines deep work as the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. He argues this skill is becoming increasingly rare, yet increasingly valuable in our economy. Most knowledge workers spend their time in shallow work, tasks that are logistical, often performed while distracted, and don't create much new value. Email, so we have touched on them, but let me list them again. Email, meetings, social media, and constant connectivity fragment our attention and prevent the sustained focus needed for meaningful intellectual work. Why deep work matters? It becomes a superpower in a distracted world. It's essential for learning complex skills quickly. It produces high quality output. It's personally fulfilling and creates a sense of meaning, which is a very critical element, creating meaning. The 4 rules Newport proposes: 1, and I'm almost done, work deeply, create rituals and systems to support sustained focus, dedicated spaces, time blocks, clear objectives. 2, embrace boredom. Train your brain to resist distraction by practicing concentration and avoiding the urge to fill every idle moment with stimulation. 3, quit social media. Be ruthlessly selective about digital tools, using them only if they provide substantial benefits to your professional and personal goals. And 4, drain the shallows. Minimize shallow work through better scheduling, batching similar tasks, and being more selective about commitments. The book, in my view, is essentially a manual for reclaiming your ability to think deeply in an increasingly shallow world, quite relevant to our topic today. So I thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't go too far beyond my 10-minute limit.
Thank you so much. You said so much. I'm touched so deeply. I'd like everybody to just take a moment. Thank you. Much, much to keep working with there. We have lots of applause on the screen. Lots of agreement. And our plan today is to have all 3 speakers speak first, and then for them to be in a roundtable. And you're welcome to put your thoughts in the chat. And so we'll be in roundtable with everyone. We'll be in discussion with everyone here. And so our next speaker is Kehkashan Basu. She is the founder president of Global Innovation Enterprise Green Hope Foundation, which works at the grassroots level in 28 countries, empowering over 500,000 young people and women, especially those from vulnerable communities. She has done so much. She's a global influencer, an educator, an environmentalist, a champion of women's and children's rights, a TEDx speaker. The list goes on and on. She won the International Children's Peace Prize and has been listed as a Forbes 30 under 30. And with that, Kehkashan, we so look forward to your thoughts today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to connect with all of you in this virtual space. And as a grassroots actor, my work, like this is a question that I continuously have been asking myself for the last more than a decade now. It is a very relevant question because I feel like if we are trying to achieve any kind of progress towards achieving a sustainable world, it's something that we should be asking ourselves at all times, because we should never, ever become complacent and be like, okay, we've done everything we can. It's all done. So it doesn't work that way. We need to, continuously work towards that better future. And so I, as a grassroots actor, wanted to share my perspective on the power of ground level actions in facilitating global transformation, because sometimes it can seem very overwhelming to think about this kind of existential question. But what I found really works is if we're taking these small everyday actions to address and work towards global transformation, this is our way of ensuring that we're kind of working in our own sphere of influence to create positive change. So obviously, as a grassroots actor, work in so many different parts of the world. There are so many different challenges that exist, and therefore there are so many different solutions as well, which is just wonderful. And so, as was mentioned earlier, we work in 28 countries with over 500,000 people, addressing literally every aspect of sustainability. And we learned that that is very much needed for that, global transformation, because you can't really work in silos if we're to achieve a truly sustainable future. So our first step, and we work with from our youngest minds to those who are already, adults, and we work to ensure that first people have the knowledge to take actions to think and act for a sustainable future. So through our Education for Peace and Sustainable Development Academies, we work to ensure that this knowledge is ingrained in our youngest minds. That includes disarmament education for peace education as well through our We Want Books, Not Nukes campaign. I mean, complete nuclear abolition is like a very big part of the work that we do to achieve this global transformation. So ensuring our young people know about this is a very important part of our work as well. Now, we also see that while we can impart education, if there is no infrastructure present, you can't really do anything. And so we built our Green Hope Foundation Solar Powered Academy of Hope for women and girls. So this is in rural Bangladesh that provides climate resilience education to girls in the mornings, functions as a sewing school for women in the evenings. We do sustainable fashion competitions, teaching classes. We had our first group of women graduate with diplomas in sewing so that they're now getting orders and they're able to have a stable source of income. And that in turn creates peace for the communities. We work to build solar computer labs for STEM and STEAM education, working with at-risk youth, particularly. So this is in Liberia, in the Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove forest, as well as in rural Western India, to make sure that at-risk young people, especially girls, don't miss out on this very important education. We ensure digital connectivity for communities by distributing routers. We make sure that all children in the communities we work with have access to equitable education through our solar-powered mobile libraries, taking books to the doorstep of children who've been out of school for a year or more. We also work to create safe spaces for those in climate disaster zones, especially for women and girls, so they feel safe coming out of their homes in the evenings. So we've built solar streetlights in Bangladesh, in Liberia, most recently in Cambodia, and you can see like the before and after, like the transformation brought about by the solar streetlights. We work to preserve women and protect women and girls' health because in a lot of the communities we work in, the domain of cooking falls to them. And so to protect their respiratory health, we distribute and train them on using solar, electric, and eco cookers. We also work to ensure water security because that's a big part of the work we do with global transformation. So we've installed deep bore tube wells in Bangladesh. This year, we installed 10 tube wells in several rural communities in Cambodia, as well as did water filter distribution for the communities that were impacted severely by water insecurity. We also do a lot of rainwater harvesting as part of our climate adaptation programs and distributing reusable water storage containers so that children and girls, instead of walking miles to fetch water and missing out on education, they can actually store the water and use that time to, get access to education. We've built solar water farms in small island developing states like Kiribati to combat the increase in brackish water coming in and polluting groundwater. So this makes sure that indigenous communities have access to clean drinking water. So this was the first one that we did. This is our second water farm that we installed in Kiribati just a month ago. Similarly, in Cambodia, even though it's not a small island developing state, to address the problem of water insecurity there, we've built 2 solar water farms as well that addresses, like, each water farm gives water to like 10 villages. So we're able to ensure kind of large scale water security for the communities. We build sanitation stations in climate disaster zones to protect women and girls' health, provide sanitation training as well to make sure that people are aware about how they can keep themselves and their communities clean. We ensure basic human right of access to toilets in several communities that we work in. In fact, we have an installation going on right now in the Sundarbans as well. And we work with our youngest minds to ensure that they have the knowledge and skills to, for instance, take simple actions like growing their own food in their communities. So whether it's in the UAE or in Canada or in Oman, from 5 years old to 18 years old, we work with them to make sure that they're able to have food security in their communities. So, for instance, in Peru and the outskirts of Lima, we work with indigenous young people and women to reclaim the land previously used for cash crops and utilizing that to grow their own food. In Kiribati, because, as I mentioned, brackish water in the soil, so we grow food in pots to ensure food security for the indigenous communities. And here in Canada, where I'm from, we have our solar organic farm where we do solar irrigation as well as working with students as well as those from retirement homes to practice intergenerational farming and solidarity for the mental health and well-being and physical well-being of older persons as well as young people to really create these sustainable, peaceful communities. So as you can see, this is the produce from our farm that we then donate to food banks in the region. We also teach our young members to compost, utilize solar innovations like agrivoltaics to empower young farmers as well as women farmers. This is in Bangladesh and this is in India, to increase their crop yield by over 30% and make sure that we're able to achieve mass food security in areas that are most impacted by climate change. We also work on empowering tiger widows. So in the Sundarbans, women who've lost their husbands to tiger attacks, working with them on animal husbandry and using, distributing chickens, ducks, goats, fish, to teach them about ways that they can utilize that for earning a stable source of income, achieving food security as well, but also earning a stable source of income to send their children to school and to live good lives. And then we work on making sure that we keep our surroundings clean. So whether that's fjord cleanups in Norway or canal cleanups in the Netherlands, beaches, parks from the UAE to the US, ravine cleanups here in Canada, working particularly on cigarette stub collections as well as plastic fishing. So literally fishing the plastic out of our waterways and ensuring that our young people know where their waste lands up. So field trips to recycling plants and ensuring that including e-waste recycling. So this is in the Netherlands. And in this way, we are able to ensure that not only are young people aware about all of these different aspects of sustainability, but they are also aware of how they can take actions. And so that empathy then extends to other creatures as well as human beings, turtles, for instance, whether that's freshwater or sea turtle conservation, they're plants and animals. So we've planted over 1.5 million trees all around the world from DR Congo to Barbados, over 650,000 mangroves all across the world, in the Bahamas, in the UAE, in Suriname, Vietnam. And then we take these actions and we, as a UN accredited organization, bring it to within the UN space. So we have engaged with policymakers at the highest levels of policymaking, whether that's within various UN spaces, whether it's ECOSOC or UNEP or UNCCD, or this, for instance, was during the high-level discussion on the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Every single aspect of the actions that we undertake, we then try to bridge that gap between the top-down and bottom-up processes. And what I've learned working in this field is that empathy, compassion, honesty, hard work, and purposefulness are really important qualities when we're trying to work towards global transformation, because the work is really, really hard. But at the end of the day, having these qualities ensures that we're able to kind of continue to be empathetic and compassionate towards our fellow human being, towards our fellow organisms on this earth. So the question of, are we working deeply enough for global transformation, is something that I try to address through our everyday actions that we undertake at Green Hope Foundation. And it's our way of making sure that, this is not just a question that is something for really far away, or, putting the blame on someone else that, oh, someone else can work deeply enough. We don't have to do that. We don't believe in that. We know that every single action that we undertake contributes to creating a better world. And that is our way of addressing the question and making sure that we showcase the power of ground level actions, everyday ground level actions, step by step, building towards that sustainable future. Are we working deeply enough? That question still remains to be answered and seen by, I guess, future generations. But we should try our best, and that is exactly what we're doing. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kehkashan. Thank you so much. It's really amazing to see your work. Yeah, I see lots of appreciation out there. Our next speaker is Dr. Will Keepin. He's president and executive director of the Satya Institute in Boulder, Colorado, and also the founder of Gender Reconciliation International, which has organized more than 75 intensive gatherings in 7 countries dedicated to the healing and reconciliation between women and men. Will comes to gender work by a very unusual path. He's a mathematical physicist with 30 scientific publications. He's a well-respected physicist in his field and has worked on sustainable energy and global warming. And he has presented testimony to European and Australian parliaments and the United States House of Representatives. He's been there as a whistleblower in nuclear science policy. He's a fellow of the Findhorn Foundation and author of Divine Duality, The Power of Reconciliation Between Women and Men. Will, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Joni, and it's a great joy and privilege to be here. And I want to thank Ambassador Young and Kehkashan Basu for those very inspiring presentations. I just want to speak to, we all recognize that we live in a time of polarization and major change. And so in these challenging circumstances, we need not only to ask, are we working deeply enough, but how are we working? In other words, what is the context and kind of basis underneath our actions? And there's a wonderful quote, I think it's from Meister Eckhart, who said that the outer work will never be great if the inner work is small. And the outer work will never be small if the inner work is great. So in other words, we have to work on ourselves. We have to do some form of inner work on ourselves in order that we can then be more effective in our work in the world. And I think at times like this that we're in now, this is more important than ever. There's a beautiful letter from Thomas Merton, who wrote a letter to a young activist who was sitting with this deep question of, a similar question, am I working deeply enough? And how can I be more effective in trying to achieve the change that I want to see? And what Thomas Merton basically said, he said a lot of things, but one of the key points that he said was, all the good you will do in the end will come not from you, but by allowing yourself to be used as an instrument of God's love. Of course, if we don't like God language, we can talk about universal love. But the idea is that we offer ourselves as instruments of in alignment with a higher wisdom, and that is a crucial orientation for this time that we're in, because we live in a time of great danger. But as the Chinese have I forget what the term is, but the danger consists of, crisis consists of danger and opportunity. So this is kind of the Chinese understanding of crisis. And so we live in a time of danger, but this is also a time of incredible opportunity. And new opportunities emerge in these extraordinary times of rapid change. And we're seeing that in our work. I mean, we've been doing community healing work for 33 years, focused on transmuting gender injustice and establishing beloved community. So it's basically working with the kind of psychological and human fabric of the community by going into some of the deepest challenges and wounds within the human family, which are related to gender injustice, racial injustice, and these types of structural injustice that are so rampant around the world, and creating community contexts where deep truth can be spoken. And we are seeing such profound transformations and liberations, and it's so exquisite. I just got an email yesterday from a program in Kenya, and last week from one in South Africa, in which there is a level of total community transformation taking place. There's something through this work, there's something about creating an experience of reconciliation and liberation that is so empowering at a time when there's so much despair in the world. And this is another point that I think is really important, is that we must not despair. We must not allow ourselves to sink in despair, because love was mentioned early on. Joni said that, she was bringing love to the UN. It's really important. As Gandhi said, the entire kind of humanity basically operates by the force of love. And that what we call history is really the chronicle of the interruptions of the forces of love, truth, and wisdom. And this is really important for me as I watch so many major changes, and we do see unprecedented deconstruction of certain protections and certain structures that have been around for hundreds of years. So it's a very remarkable time right now. And I'm reminded of when Desmond Tutu was in his long-term struggle against apartheid, and probably 10 years before it all came to such a dramatic conclusion, he was challenged by a reporter, I believe it was a reporter, basically saying, this whole protest movement of yours is completely meaningless and superficial, because apartheid's been with us for decades. Nelson Mandela has been in prison for almost 20 years. Your little protests amount to nothing. And apartheid's not going to go away. It's so deeply established in the society from the highest levels of government. And Desmond Tutu just chuckled and said, well, he said, we live in a moral universe. Apartheid is immoral. Therefore, it cannot help but crumble to dust. It's only a question of when. And this is really important to keep in mind, is that tyranny always fails. As Gandhi said, tyrants always fall. They cannot last because they are out of alignment with cosmic and universal law. And so this is really important for us to keep in mind. And it helps me in times of despair to keep my head above water, to keep going and focusing on the things that I know need to be done. Because as Blaise Pascal, who was referenced earlier once already today, he also said, the heart has reasons of which reason has no knowledge. And in particular, I would say the heart has spiritual powers of which political power has no knowledge. So we must recognize that there are larger forces of good and of the powers of love that are operative here, no matter how dark it seems to get. I'm also reminded of Martin Luther King when he encountered the work of Reinhold Niebuhr, who wrote a book called Moral Man in Moral Society in the mid-30s, I think. And basically, Reinhold Niebuhr had given a very astute and accurate account of the power of evil in the collective. And the purpose of that book, the title of that book was meant to say that human beings in collectives are capable of unspeakable evils that no one human being would approve of. That's why he called it Moral Man, but Immoral Society. And King grappled with this mightily when he encountered it, because Niebuhr had done such a great job and astute job of analyzing the power of darkness and evil in human collectives and in society. But then King had a breakthrough realization. He realized that Niebuhr had overlooked the power of love to do the same thing. And as King put it, if our pessimism about human nature is not balanced by an optimism about divine nature, then we overlook the cure of grace. And he realized that Niebuhr had overlooked the cure of grace. And it wasn't a critique of Niebuhr so much as it was a recognition that we must not cave to the forces of despair and doubt and darkness, and must always remember that love, truth, and wisdom will prevail. And so our key work is to identify which bit is ours to do, and to do it with the fullness of our hearts, and to be on the lookout for those new opportunities right now, precisely because things are changing so rapidly and long-term structures are dissolving, there are also remarkable opportunities for new initiatives and for new effectiveness in the good work. And we've seen this in our work. We've gotten several invitations in our work from quarters that we would not have expected, that we haven't gotten before. People saying, we want to address the misogyny in society. We want to address the inequality between the genders. We want to take this on. And they're inviting it because of the current circumstances that we're seeing in our world. So I think it's important to recognize that ultimately the forces of politics are not in charge here. There are larger universal and spiritual forces with which we can align ourselves, and which are basically moving in ways that are unseen by the mind. So thank you very much. It's a great goal. Are we working deeply enough? I think we are, and I think that my personal conviction is that we have no idea the magnitude of the transformation that's coming. And not to make light of the challenges, but I also think that we have the capacity for a major transformative breakthrough in human civilization that's been a long time coming, and that we should hold that conviction and stand for love and truth no matter what. Thank you.
Ooh, yes. Yes. Thank you so much. So with that, I open the floor to our three presenters, and I open the chat to those of you who are here to put your thoughts, your questions, your concerns. And we'll start in order to just get some conversation going with Ambassador King.
Oh yes. Oh, my mic is still open. Well, thank you to both Ms. Basu and Mr. Keepan for your brilliant presentations. And I see them, the three presentations speak to each other. And I think, Joni, I don't know who designed the program, but sandwiching the expression of deep work in Ms. Basu's presentation is brilliant, because what she expressed is an example, or it is itself the expression of deep work, because that is brilliant, because it's one thing to be thinking, but then thinking must lead us to a better place. And what Ms. Basu is doing is leading us to a better place. And I think it's brilliant. It encapsulates what we aim for in deep thinking, is to make the world a better place. So I really thank you for that. And then our final speaker, in bringing in the thing that occupies us so much today, the forces of politics are not an end in itself, and they are not the thing. So that's a very, because it preoccupies our imagination today. We are very reactive to the politics of the day. We are discombobulated, I think, by the goings on. So again, deep thinking is going to take us out of there. That's not the end. It is perhaps an expression of not enough thinking. So I thank you, because these, to me, I find them inextricably linked and powerful expressions of the topic of today. But I can come back in, and I would like to hear what our colleagues thought of it, Ms. Basu and Mr. Keepen.
Yes. Great. Kehkashan?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there is so much learning that needs to happen at all times. And I think that I personally love being a part of dialogues such as these, because it's not only about, the work that we do and sharing that, but also continually learning from other people who are in the space and who are constantly thinking about things like this. I think a lot of the times, we as people who are committed to creating a better world, sometimes we assume that, okay, yeah, some other people are also thinking that way, but in reality, that's not the case. Not every single person is thinking about, oh, how is this action of mine going to affect another person, or how is it going to affect the future? So being a part of dialogues such as these gives me a lot of hope, because I'm like, okay, yeah, these are questions that are being addressed. And I, for one, loved being a part of this dialogue where I was able to hear from people who have done so much and who are constantly thinking about how we as a collective, humanity, how we can continually strive to be better and create a better world with a life of dignity for all.
Thank you. Will.
Thank you. I just find these presentations so inspiring. And I think it's important for us to stay connected to our inspiration in times like this. I also think, Joni, you mentioned at the beginning, the science and how science comes into this. I think it's important to recognize that our whole model of Western science is finally coming to recognize the inherent interconnectedness of the entire cosmos. This is really crucial, that all of life is one, the human family is one, and our minds and our eyes train us to believe in separation. When we walk out into the forest and we see all the trees and they look separate, each tree standing alone. But if you go underneath the soil, you see a whole vast network of interconnected mycelium networks where they are all in communication. There's sending nutrients to one another. There's a whole vast connection and interconnection that's invisible above ground, that's taking place below ground. And this is essentially the nature of our human condition. What's visible to the naked eye is that we're all separate, 9 billion people living separate lives at some level. And that's what this scientific instrument also sees. It sees separate bodies, 9 billion of us. But the spiritual eye and the eye of spiritual vision And the spiritual reality is that we're all deeply interconnected. As the great philosopher Thomas Berry said, the universe is not a collection of objects, it's a communion of subjects. And so each of us is deeply interconnected with others. And quantum physics has now shown this. And even Einstein couldn't accept it. Einstein repudiated as what he called, spooky action at a distance. The idea that photons, many light years apart could be directly and immediately and instantaneously connected was just beyond his capacity to embrace. But that's what the data were showing. So I think it's very important that even our science and our philosophy is beginning to show this fundamental interconnection of every one of us with everyone else. And this is part of the gift of the internet and of our media technology today. And so the kind of work like that you're doing, Kehkashan, showing all these different projects, we're looking at our own condition. We're looking at humanity, solving humanity's problems in all these different dimensions. I find it so inspiring because I feel like the human family is slowly coming together as one. We see it in our work also. We particularly focus on gender injustice, and we work, that data you mentioned early on was a little outdated, Joni. I should update my bio. But anyway, we've been working for 33 years on every continent, and it is astounding to see how in every society, the symptoms are basically different, but the fundamental structural injustice is the same. And the oppression of women and girls and of people of heterosexual identity is universal. And yet, and yet this is transformable. We see the possibility of transforming this by creating communities of truth-telling, because nothing can withstand the powers of truth and love. And no falsehood can stand forever in the face of those forces. And so I place my faith and conviction there. And I find it a very inspiring time right now, even though it's also a very challenging time. Thank you.
Ambassador, I'll give you the last word before we wind up.
To me?
Yeah, Kehkashan, if you have anything to add, please do. We're ready to wind up.
I was wondering what our colleagues are they mic'd? I would love to hear what.
I was hoping people would put things in the chat, and they're not there, and we're getting close on time. This was only meant to be an hour long, but we would love to hear in the chat.
Yes, perhaps because it would be lovely to hear what they received from that and their own thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you. Takeaways, please. Takeaways in the chat. What have you received?
Everyone is too shy to speak.
We
saw hearts going up when we was listening to so I will jump in the meantime. Like reason has no knowledge. You said that was Reinhold Niebuhr, and he's a thinker that I have read and I'm so impressed by by his thinking. I've been inspired by it. So just a few parting words, since we all have to run off now. And thanks, Joni, for doing this. And thanks also for keeping us on time, which is a critically important thing. But I would say that we live in uncertain times, or as one of my famous writers, the Algerian writer, I'm forgetting, Albert Camus said that we live in interesting times, and he said that decades ago, and I think that the times are becoming more interesting. But as we contemplate United Nations, this is what we all have in common, that we work in this particular space that is under threat. And let's set aside the idea that should we not have it, we would have had to create it. So what we need to be working toward is preserving it. And conversations like this Joni, led by you and the Unitive cluster, is exactly what we need. And we need to see how we can expand this. So the question that I want to put back to you and your colleagues is, how do you get more of the practitioners to join this conversation? In this formulation, are we thinking deeply enough? And I would recommend to everyone here, if you haven't heard of these two books, they are by Ian McGilchrist. Have you heard of that, Mr. Keepin? Have you heard of him?
Yes, yes, I'm
Mhm.
familiar with his work. Yes.
Yeah, and I recommend that because he's speaking about a whole of brain that we have concentrated. Western civilization have inspired us to one side of the brain, which is the left side of the brain, and
Right.
it's the whole of brain thinking that needs to come, and very importantly, the right side of the brain that does the kind of deep thinking that we are talking about. They are inextricably linked. We don't want to privilege one side over the other because that will be reversing the problem. But what he is suggesting is that the deeper thinking, the bigger picture, so he calls it the master and his emissary, calling the right brain that does the holistic thinking, is sideline to the emissary that does the minute execution of tasks. But we need, so deep thinking brings us back to that holistic space. So I recommend his books, The Matter of Things. There are 3 huge books, but they're worth it. They will inform further discussions around this topic. So The Master and His Emissary is one, and the other 2 are The Matter of Things. They are tomes in and of themselves, but they are well worth the visit. So my last words is that we must keep having these conversations, and I want to express my gratitude to the youngest amongst us, Miss Basu. Keep up your good work, because you are our inspiration today, because this is what gives us the hope that even when things look dark, even as politics are running amok here today, you demonstrate to us today with the work that you do that hope is alive. Deep work is alive. We just need to spread it more widely. So thank you again, Joni, for doing this, and let's keep doing it.
Yes, absolutely. I want to end. Sabita, I saw your hand up. Shall we bring it to an end, or did you want to say something? Okay.
It's okay. What Ambassador said, it was beautiful roundup. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. The Unitive Cluster meets only UN NGOs, and people working at the UN are welcome. And if you are one of those people, we would love to have you join us. We meet on the second Friday of every month at 12:30, always in the same place. And you can put your name in the chat if you would like information about that, and your email, please. I want to thank so much Ambassador Rhonda King, Kehkashan Basu, Will Keepin. Thank you, Nora Sweeney, for providing our tech support. Thank you, all the cluster members who have been working with us all along, and particularly cluster leadership, which is Tezekiah Gabriel, John Clausen, Scott, and Sabita. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you. Thank you for this privilege.
Thank you. Peace profound, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Keep up the good work, everyone.
Thank you.